I feel like I should do much more of an exciting intro to this episode because this was a rare treat to be able to find somebody who you followed in the industry, have been lucky enough to actually know in real life, and to see those two things come back together, synergies, in an opportunity to jump on a podcast. This is the merger of all of those things for me from a really great content creator, a really great human. Also, pretty cool. He's a West Coast guy, living in Vancouver, living the West Coast life. This is Buu Lam on the DiscoPosse podcast. Hey crew, welcome back. This is one of those fun ones because I get to just sit back and let amazing content get created. This is Buu Lam. He is in the developer advocacy group and ultimately helping to bring the world of F5 to consumers, helping people to engage in the dev community. Buu has been somebody who I've really enjoyed watching. He had a long run as an SE in F5, but then moved into the community side. It was the dev community, very recently rebranded. We talk about that, but more so, we get to nerd out on all the tech that he uses to set up his very own videos. So number one, follow Buu on LinkedIn because he's a fantastic content creator. But this is the fun part because I get to really just take in information and learn from somebody who I think is a consummate professional, and he gave me great advice along the way for my own podcast. So thank you, Buu, for really giving back to the community at large and taking time when there was really no need for him to do it. It was just something that he chose to do. That's pretty darn good if you ask me. And if you want to help to make great content like this happen, do me a favor and just hit that little like button and click on subscribe so you can see when new stuff like this is coming out, and hit the bell icon. Oh, that's right. And make sure you drop in a comment and say, Buu Lam, thank you very much. Love the podcast. Okay, you don't have to say exactly that, but it'd be kind of cool to see that a bunch of times. So there you go. Buu Lam, love the podcast. Thanks very much. With that, let's get into it.
Hey everyone, my name is Buu. I'm a community evangelist with F5 DevCentral, and you're listening to the DiscoPosse podcast.
Thing and beauty. It's also like a sibilance test, right? It's like the worst thing for any microphone, a DiscoPosse. It's got pops and S's and
I went with the modest pop filter on this thing, foamy thing, but yeah, sometimes I wonder if I should have put the big one on.
Yeah, no, it's super clear. So, and this is the fun part, Buu, that I've been taking in your content for a while, so it is a true honor and a pleasure to share a microphone with you for a podcast because we have a fun, history, personal history that, we, thanks to the LinkedIn world, stayed connected. And I suddenly started seeing some really neat, dynamic, good video stuff coming up in my feed. And more, I saw kind of what you were doing. I then saw you doing videos about what you're doing. And those videos got better and better and better. And I was like, Buu is on something. This is it. Like, this is, I love your progression to what you've been doing. And
thank you.
It's cool. So I'm super happy to, we're going to nerd out a bit on tech, which is natural for us to do. But I'm also excited about what you and the F5 team are doing. So for folks that are new to you, if you don't mind, give a quick bio and an introduction about what you're doing with F5.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I got to say thanks for having me on because I've been watching your content as well. And, it's been really cool to see somebody deliver this type of content in this level of quality for such a long time as well. I think a lot of folks, I don't call myself that unique right now, although maybe I am a little bit, but there's a lot of people putting out really good quality content now. But dating back a couple of years, you've been doing this for a while now and putting out great quality content. So I'm honored to be here. If I were to dial it back, maybe our history, I used to work at a reseller here in Vancouver, British Columbia. and I was a network security consultant there. And at that reseller, I met a younger Eric Wright, who was a really bright guy. And we got to look at a few things with your organization, and that was way back in the late 2000s at
Yeah.
that point, and early part of my career. So I finished school around 2004, 2005, and got my first job in IT at that point. I learned a bunch of stuff, but that company ended up getting bought out by a even bigger company. And then I moved on to do the whole consulting thing through a reseller. So I was doing that for a number of years. I was always in the network security space. And then in 2011, I moved to F5, which is where I am now. And my story at F5 is pretty basic, actually. I started as a sales engineer, and up until last year, I was a sales engineer for 10 years, working with the same sales rep, covering the same territory, almost exactly the same territory throughout those years, with a couple spots of covering for turnover here and there for other territories as well. But I did that job for 10 years, covering F5 products, talking to a number of folks within British Columbia about F5 products. And yeah, just last year moved over to the DevCentral team, which is F5's user community, which is really important to F5. We dedicate a number of folks to working on building that community relationship with everybody. And as part of that, we've been doing a lot of live streaming and video work. But I was actually doing that prior to joining the team, and I was doing that for my customers. And I was doing that because of the pandemic. Everybody was at home, and I was like, okay, well, I got to keep engaged with my territory. And so we couldn't have user groups anymore. We actually, at the start of the pandemic, had to cancel our user groups. So I was like, okay, well, let's just do some of this stuff on video. And then, yeah, like you said, started making videos, and I look back at my YouTube channel that I had started at that time, and I thought they were okay videos at the time. Now I look back, I'm like cringing, but they progressed over time. You keep putting out content, it gets better, and then eventually this role with the Dev Central community, they had a headcount open after there was a bit of a shuffle there, and I was able to join the team and kind of do this at a level for the broader F5, just to help out with these efforts here. So that's my background, if that's enough info for you.
That's awesome. And it's funny that, the progression to evangelists, like when I started cheated the system when I came to then VM Turbo and it became
Mm,
Turbonomic. I was working out on the West Coast for a few years. I moved back to Toronto, still working for the same firm, and but I was blogging, and then through that piece of it, that was kind of that first layer of like me just finding a problem, sharing a problem, similar to what you're doing now with like that conversion of user group to a video format. And then in doing that, you're like, oh, what if I just did more than just like wait till I bumped into a problem to write about the problem and the solution? So I then started proactively building content and proactively reviewing stuff and getting involved. And next, you find yourself at an event and you're sitting at a blogger table and you're
mm,
thinking about it more purposefully. And from
yeah.
there, then when I got the gig at Turbo, it was I got hired as the evangelist. And at the time that was kind of now they call it developer advocacy or whatever, right? Like
Mm,
the idea was being not in sales, not in marketing, sort of spanning both the understanding of it, but really being in the customer's world, in the seat of the consumer of your product, and having that honest outside voice to bring into it. So that's
yeah.
really what I was lucky enough to have that background in my blog, and it led me to that first gig. Again, so let's map to what you're doing, and why I really dig the way you do this, Boo, is that you've always got the mind of the consumer, the user, like you've always been very human centric in your approach to technology, and your storytelling is really great. So this makes it easy to take in, and
Thanks.
you've got a great delivery. So it's a surprisingly rare thing to have both a creative mind and ability, as well as a strong technical capability. It is sort of a unicorn, type of personality, which is good. And I'm glad that you're, finding a really great home in your role at F5, because it's deserved, because you've got a lot to bring, and it's tough to find those gigs sometimes that like give you that freedom to be creative, but also, you got to really get deep into the tech sometimes.
Well, it is funny that you use the word unicorn. My boss would say that he has a team of unicorns, and we're finding that out now because there's an open headcount on our team. We've got a couple folks that are lined up and look like we'll hopefully have someone pretty quick here. But yeah, to find somebody who wants to jump in technically, who is somebody who cares for community, that's a huge part of it. Like really understanding the needs of others and being there to serve as opposed to trying to serve yourself. And then also be someone who's willing to jump in front of the camera at a moment's notice and just be out there for everybody, or somebody who can write and somebody who can produce videos as well. Like this yeah, it when I thought about it, I was like, "Oh, I'm just kind of adding little bits and pieces onto my existing role." But now that we're actually looking for that role, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, how am we gonna find this person? Like that how many
Yeah.
of these people exist?" Because I thought there was a whole bunch of me, but turns out there wasn't.
You've broken the mold, right? And it's funny that I think even in today, like literally today, compared to what it was even 2 years ago, especially like pre-pandemic, the like YouTuber was a pejorative. Like it was
Mm,
just like, oh, you want to be a YouTuber? Like, what does that even mean? Now you say YouTuber and everybody can name multi-millionaire
yeah.
personalities. They may still kind of dislike that it exists, but they know it. It's more name brand, right? When I was at, back when we met, right, I remembered seeing this video of a guy who was someone with a camera was filming him, and he was going around and taking a bicycle, and he was stealing bicycles in New York City. And every one he would do would start by like getting on a bike and then just riding it away and watching the reaction of people around it. And there's no reaction, right? Then he would get on one and he would like mess with the lock and then ride away. No reaction. There was one where there was like a cop standing right beside it. And then he was sitting there like with a hacksaw sawing through this lock. And then somebody came over and like the caption was, "Oh, finally someone's going to call me out." But instead, the guy didn't call him out. He's like, "You know what you should do? You should be cutting the chain, not the lock. The chain's easier to cut."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the guy basically held it for him while he cut it. Then he got on the bike and rode away. Well, that was Casey Neistat.
That's hilarious.
And so it was like filmed on goodness knows what, like super early stage camera was, but he was doing these, viral YouTube films before YouTube was even a thing. Like it was a brand new platform. And now I look years later and, people are going to the
That's
Casey
hilarious.
Neistat film class right now, which is a brand new thing that's offered through monthly, stuff like that. And that
Yeah.
influence now, it's there. Like we've got so much around us that has upped the game where if I don't do a video that feels like it should go on YouTube and get paid for, I feel like I'm letting myself down.
Well, the hilarious thing is, like, quite literally 2.5 years ago at this point, I told my kids, YouTube is not a career. Don't get your hopes up that you are gonna be on YouTube and actually make money doing this. That's like a 1 in a billion shot to do anything like that. Lo and behold, you know, pandemic hits, I'm on video all the time now and have pretty much set up a YouTube studio in my office. I'm like, "Oh, I'm eating crow at this point. It's okay." I will always admit when I'm wrong, even to my kids, especially to my kids. And so lesson learned, they saw the future before I did.
Well, I think the good lesson that we get out of it too, and I even try to like I understand why when you say like a they've surveyed kids and like primary elementary school kids, and the top jobs used to be like doctor, fireman, whatever, right? And then now the top job in almost every country they polled in was YouTuber. But
Yeah.
just like saying doctor, it's no different. they see somebody that has a great earning potential, that has a great, like, that's why people became, when you're a kid and you want to be a doctor, it's because you think a doctor makes a bunch of money and they drive nice cars, not because they're healing humans, right? It's really more about the importance of the job. So a YouTuber to that kid is an important thing. It has financial benefits, never realizing that
Yeah,
to get there is a grind. And
absolutely.
there's no, even if you get a viral, if I got one video that went to 1 million views, the next video would go to 1,000, right? It's not,
Yeah.
nothing is guaranteed. You've got to grind it out for years and years. Even this podcast, or this will be, like a 216th episode. Like that's 216 weeks of content. And I feel like I'm just figuring it out.
Your persistence is amazing to me, to just keep pushing out content, especially like, for us in a similar space looking for tech content, which isn't, I'll admit, it's not always the most interesting thing
Yeah.
to us. It's interesting, and that's why we do it. But to an audience, like, I think from an audience eye, how do I keep this interesting for them? How do I make this, maybe something hasn't come out in weeks and nothing new, like hot and shiny, is out there to talk about. How do I keep putting out something that will interest them? And for you to do it for 216 weeks in a row is very commendable.
There was a gap in the middle where I wasn't sure it was going to happen. Yeah, there's definitely somewhere around. I think that's why everybody I know, I got a lot of fantastic friends who are our peers in the industry, right? And everybody had a podcast. And then about episode 11 to 15, the wheels come off the bus, because it's like easy just to grab your friends. We all have the same friends, so we all get on each other's podcast. It's like having a party, but it at some point you have to actually seek out the subject. You have to seek out something new and be curious about it in that process. And that was the differentiating thing, was my sort of blind willingness to keep on pushing when there's no listeners and no feedback. But I think, just like you, what we start to do is you translate what you do in true human interaction and learn to do it with a camera, where, even this, like, I'm actually looking into a lens. I've learned how to do this instead of looking down at the screen so that you see the top of my forehead and me eyes pointing down. I have to learn to engage the camera. And so I do it for demos, and I started doing live streams, and your stuff is fantastic. I love your streams because it's a different pace, it's a different cadence, but you keep the energy level, like, it flows. It's not just, as you can see, we're going to go through, you click on here, you hit F5, and, like, you
I
really
turn
have a good
myself
way
off.
of, yeah, it's like, create content that you would like to sit down and watch. I mean, maybe it sounds too just like easy to say that, but that really is my approach to it. And again, like, to your credit, you've nailed that. And heck, I learn from you on a daily basis these days.
Oh, thanks. I mean, one of the things I do too is think about the why. Like, why did I start this, or why do I keep doing this? And my why at the start of the pandemic was, and maybe it wasn't true, but I thought, you know what, my customers, they're missing out on their user group, which was always a great time. Like, we would get as many people together, we'd sit down in a restaurant, and that was actually like a safe time for the customers. Like, we'd be in meetings with customers, and yeah, we have a point to that meeting. We're usually either catching up and then showing them our latest wares, and seeing what they want to do. But the user group was like, oh, you've already bought the stuff. Like, I don't need to sell you anything now. So I get to
Yeah.
talk to you in a safe place and say, okay, here's the stuff that you bought. Here's all the cool things that other people are doing with it. Let's chat about that. And then, hopefully that strengthens our relationship. And so that cancels, and we don't have that anymore. And so I'm like, maybe I won't go as far to say maybe they miss me, but maybe maybe we're missing this interaction now. So how do we still maintain that interaction? So I always thought about that every week, like, um, my Monday morning ones, when I was doing it in territory, they were always like, um, 10 minutes of actually talking about F5 stuff, maybe 5 minutes of talking about F5 stuff, maybe
Yeah.
0 minutes of talking about F5 stuff. And otherwise, it was like me and Daryl catching up on our weekends, because that's usually something that we would do actually every Monday morning. We just kind of chat about how our weekends went. So we chat about our weekends. We'd usually have a guest on, chat about what they're up to, and then we'd actually just bring up current events. And they might be technology related, but not necessarily F5 related. And it was just like a chat with folks. And we just kept doing that. And it's just trying to stay connected with folks, and kind of left the business stuff to like actual meetings. But that
Yeah.
kept me going for a while.
I think the really good thing, especially when we look at that advocacy role and evangelism role, it's genuinely about being a peer to the people who are using products, listening to them, and giving them a like kind of like you said, a safe place where they can share ups and downs. And quite often you'd have like two peers in our group who would be like, we've got this weird thing we're trying to do. We've got like a multi-site configuration, and I've got this weird edge site, and I don't know what to do. They're like, oh yeah, we have the same thing. We've got one place that's up, we've got, one remote site that's way out of the way, and this is the gear we use, this is our configuration. And you're like, oh, holy moly, like they're educating each other through real experience, and that's so much more genuine than even a read the manual or even a blog sometimes, because quite often like we have to create scenarios that will let us tell a story. And I do my best to try and always make sure it's a realistic scenario, but every once in a while you're talking about a feature that no one's actually used in real life, and you're trying to be, this is a really cool thing we can do, and
Yeah.
no one's done it, but please tell us if it works.
But we made it, so you can do it.
It's like I always say, show me a successful spanning tree implementation, and I'll show you a network that went down on the weekend. Because it never goes right
Great
the
call,
first
yeah.
time. It's always the second run that works.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure. One of the recent things I did was document building my Intel NUC ESX server, and it has nothing to do with F5 stuff. But I'm like, hey, somebody's going to do this at home. My scenario was that I have this old lab gear, 10 years old now at this point, 4 U's worth of lab gear that is super loud, consuming so much power, I'm sure. And I'm like, okay, I got to consolidate this down. Took 6 months to get an Intel NUC with chip shortages, supply chain issues, and whatnot. So I got the thing. I'm like, okay, I could install this in like an hour and be done, or I could spend a week documenting this whole thing and putting together all the steps and doing a write up and stuff. I'm like, it's going to benefit the community. It's not part of F5, but it's going to benefit the community. So I'm going to do that. And luckily, like my boss gives us the freedom to say, you know what, if it's going to benefit the users, then just do it. It doesn't have to be about F5 stuff necessarily. If it's going to help them, it'll help us eventually. So yeah, that's been
that
fun.
that's a good, as a management team, that's a really good insight into the value that you can bring by sharing non-product knowledge. Because really what you're creating is, we always talk about this, like the trusted advisor. We just put such a loaded overuse. It's like saying you're customer centric. Of course you're customer centric. Everybody's customer centric.
We're
What
money
does it even
centric
mean?
too.
Yeah. But like this idea of the trusted advisor, if all you do is go in and pitch the current availability of the product and the features that you've got coming up, that's not really what you're doing. By creating a listening space, by creating a collaborative, relationship where you talk about things that are not related to your product, then what happens is they get that buildup of trust, and they're like, yeah, Boo helped me out with this other thing. It was like, that was really cool. I mean, I can't, dozens of times, probably hundreds at this point, I've ended up talking with people about like weird VMware configurations and OpenStack stuff and all these like completely non-product things. But then when it suddenly comes up and they're like, oh, actually, I got a quick question about your product. And now they're free to ask. They're directing the conversation, and they trust my answer because they know I actually kind of know what I'm doing. I ran a real environment. So they build up that trust with you. And same thing for your side, right? You design
Yeah.
stuff at scale. And they don't see that sometimes when you just come in, you're like, oh yeah, I'm an SE for F5. You're like, but I've got 10 years designing at scale systems, you don't always get a chance to share that story, but when you do, then they're like, oh yeah, Boo's pretty cool. He knows what he's doing.
You know what? One thing I think about too is I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of friends in technology, like my personal friends before I get ever got into IT. I have like one friend. Well, I mean, I used to work with him, so that's how we were connected through technology. But otherwise, I don't have friends in the IT space, and so and working at a vendor, everybody is your for a sales engineer, everybody's your customer too. And so
Yeah.
my technology friends actually end up being they're formed through my customer relationships, and many of my previous customers from before are actually, I have a whole bunch of them that are actually personal friends now. But I think about it that way too. I'm like, hey, these people I'm building these relationships with. I don't want to make them empty relationships, and I don't have technology friends outside of work. So I'm going to make technology friends through all the people I get to connect with now. So that's been a really cool part of community.
When you've got really cool stuff. So you and the team just came off of F5 Velocity, right? I make sure there's
Agility.
nothing worse than when
Yep.
somebody missays the name. And it was like announcements galore, which is like my favorite time of year, right? It's like you come off
Yeah.
of company kickoff, and then you've got lots of product and community announcements. So you must be in like relieved now. You probably had the last 12 weeks were loaded with prep work and stuff. How does it feel now to be on the other side of that?
It's a breath of fresh air. It's um, more than 12 weeks. Like we made this acquisition of a company called Volterra just over a year ago at this point. And with F5, we often, historically, when we make an acquisition, we're a little bit quiet about it up front because we try to get a lot of integration stuff done first before we give something to present something to a customer. And I think part of that reason is because F5 has been such a solid brand for what our foundational business is. We're known for uptime and reliability. And so for us to take in a company and just shoot it out the door and say, hey, you guys start using this stuff, we gotta slow things down a little bit because people trust us and we can't break that trust. And so for months and months and months now, there's a bunch of stuff that's being worked on that I knew about, that I've been testing, helping, getting trained up on it and whatnot. And so all of this is sitting under your hat for months, and you can't wait to tell people about it. And so, yeah, when the 15th came around and all the press releases came out and all the stuff that now that I report into marketing now, even though I don't consider myself a marketer, but all so many people on our broader marketing team were working really hard on getting everything ready, and then to just kind of see 8 a.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. just everything just drop. And it was kind of go, go, go as far as all the news and announcements. It was just like,
Yeah.
this is awesome. It's out there now. Now I get to talk about it. Like the real work actually begins now. All this prep work happened. Now all the real work begins. But yeah, it's been really exciting to drop new products. That Volterra stuff has become F5 distributed cloud. And so we're able to kind of venture off into a new space for F5 where we were traditionally either in a data center or in a cloud data center. And now we can actually run compute in our data centers now that are spread out around the world. We can take those resources and we can run what's called a customer edge, and we can run that into whatever their data centers might be, or an Intel NUC, if you will. And then
Oh
kind of the
wow.
first platform that we've got, or the first service on that platform, is a WAP service, which is Web Application API Protection, kind of the evolution of a WAF service. So that came out as well, which F5 has always had a strong pedigree in that space. And to deliver this on the new platform, tons of really great stuff that we're able to share with everybody. And then on top of that, being part of the community team, when I joined the community team, the biggest thing that we were working on was actually a new community platform as well. And we moved on to kind of a best in breed community platform where everybody can get great, rich interaction on there. And that was just consuming a lot of our time as well. Mainly my coworker Leaf was just heads down, banging away at that. And he got it done in a big way and really delivered on a fantastic platform. And so that was being announced this week as well, which was a big relief for us to get to share that as well. So yeah, this week was a lot of stuff just coming to a head. And on top of that, getting to interact with our customers because we had it was a virtual event, but we created lots of ways for customers to still get peer to peer and also kind of casual interaction with F5 folks as well.
Oh,
And so we
nice.
were doing a lot of that, office hours and whatnot. And yeah, it's Friday now. Everything was kind of buttoned up yesterday, and yeah, we're all pretty relieved. But yeah, now the real work begins now.
And two things that are important. Number one, I always laugh at the joys of choosing like acronyms that are going to line up. And whenever I think of like web API protection, Cardi B wrecked that acronym for us. So
It's pretty
so we
bad.
gotta we gotta there's so many acronyms that we end up having to toss around, but functionally, like it's really really slick what you're doing, and the idea of like edge implementations, again, sometimes an overloaded phrase when we talk about edge, but we're seeing real implementations where real compute power that's moving into that edge tier,
Mm.
and it's finally accessible and it's common, as far as deployment patterns. It's no longer the experimental big places with these massive diverse networks. You can see like every day mid-market, even SMBs have the opportunity to use this stuff, and it's easily accessible versus it seemed experimental probably not too many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably seeing a lot of this as well, and especially if I don't know how much you're part of the IBM side of IBM and the Red Hat side of IBM, but like OpenShift, Kubernetes, like those types of workloads now have enabled this huge expansion into those types of architectures now. So it's really cool to see. It's like even in that respect, all those architectures kind of came to a head. They kind of have met at this point now where we have modern application architecture and we have edge infrastructure architectures. And now we're going to see the value of that over the next few years.
For sure. Yeah. And it was funny because, I remember VMware, a couple of years ago, they started to talk about obviously we've got, vSphere on NUC. So like micro PC implementations. And it was always sort of seemingly limited because of memory limitations on the hardware stack and the massive footprint that a traditional little VMware, virtual data center would run. And then they talked about moving it down to a Raspberry Pi. And there was this weird moment where I saw the split in people who saw the future versus people who were thinking, I've been a VMware admin for a long time, where they said, what kind of a VM can you run on a Raspberry Pi? Because there's not enough memory to run a good sized VM. Like, that's because there won't be VMs in this world. But what they're showing is that the underlay that they can manage, right? And that's what Red Hat does with satellites, so it's like just poke these endpoints all over the place. They run Kubernetes, they run OpenShift, and then just use satellite to manage them all. Very simple, lightweight phone home stuff. But now you can run it. We used to joke about, oh, you're going to run an OS on a router. Like, no, you're not. OSs are huge. Not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
It's super neat to see.
what's the What's the thing that kind of really made you jump up when you saw it coming that now can share? Obviously, the community platform's huge because the interactivity is neat. But on the product side, is there something where you just kind of want to take every customer and said, you got to check this out?
Yeah. Well, especially definitely for the web application API protection stuff is that, I don't expect you to have configured an F5 WAF before, but let's just say it is. Sometimes you have to go through a bit of training in order to get everything kind of dialed in properly on that. And credit to my customers before. Like I had so many customers who put in the effort to do that, to learn the platform and to get really good at configuring their WAF and did it well. But it was an investment in time to go learn what all the buttons and knobs were to be able to turn on the different protections, to tune it for their applications, to work with the application teams to actually learn or get a Swagger file, get all the APIs. If the application team even documented or created Swagger
That's right.
files in the first place. And so all that work is like we're not nobody's going to be out of a job, but your job is going to become a whole lot easier in operationally, and it's going to become more strategic than it is operational now. WAF admins are going to move to something like this and be able to spend their time focused on, do I have all the policies in place now that I've got protection up front that I can configure really quickly. Now let's spread that out. Now let's get more applications under this because it's easy to do. Everybody can trust it. It's easy to architect into the application. It's all automatable, so we can make it part of the CI/CD pipeline now, so that the application developers aren't kind of reacting, after something's being deployed. Maybe they can start testing this out behind there during development phase. So yeah, I'm really excited to see this just move at such a greater pace than it was before. Sometimes we would sell a WAF to a customer and we'd revisit in 6 months, and they'd have it enabled, but not in blocking mode. Maybe a year
Yeah.
later, they'd have it in blocking mode. Like, yeah, now people are going to be that much further along in that journey.
Well, and it's interesting because how do you develop a user experience flow when there's very few users who are ready for that type of implementation? So to the credit of the team, right, it's like getting out there, spending the effort, letting people try it out, learning from how they're using it. It's often that whole thing of, customers don't ask you how your product works. They tell you how your product works. I've got engineers all the time, and they'll say like, I don't understand, like, no one's using this. Like if you put in, analytics on the platform, they're like, I don't understand why they don't use this flow or the screen or this wizard. I'm like, because that's not how they use the product. Ask them how they use the product. And then they go,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So the wizard should emulate the active implementation, not how you believe the product should be consumed. And it's tough, especially with the complexity of, doing that kind of API interactivity, where, like you said, on the back end, that sometimes the developers don't even think about,
Yeah.
self-documenting APIs. If it isn't self-documenting, it isn't getting made, right?
Right. Those were
Thank
my favorite meetings too, was to bring a product manager out to speak with customers. And it was awesome because we could put the product manager in front of the customer. You're like, see, that's what they're saying. Like that, I'm not just parroting lies to you. Like they're actually saying that they use it in this way. So hopefully this kind of helps. And it has every single time. It's always able to help shape the product. So for any folks out there who has a vendor who wants to bring a product manager to come see you, please take those meetings. For the benefit of your product, because that shapes how the product comes out.
if you think organizationally, the one thing I wish we had was like, so as an SE, you were, a quota carrying, person for the company. So you've got different commitments. You obviously, like, there's greater upside opportunity, in doing that. You're better at it in that you are really thinking true customer value and customer relationship, which some people don't. They just think I got to nail my quota this quarter. So, but then
Yeah.
on the back end, so in the developer advocacy and in the product management, there's no quota attached. But I almost think like a customer meeting we should have quotas of true customer interactions as part of it to make sure that you're out there and listening and learning.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try to measure, actually. That's something that we have been discussing internally, is like how do you measure the effectiveness of community? And there have been attempts at doing that. One company that we work with has a metric that takes in a whole bunch of stuff off of our platform to give us an idea, but that's just based off of the platform, really. For me, when I was a sales engineer for 10 years, we always looked at it from a long-term perspective. Like you see sales reps and SEs that kind of bounce around different gigs.
Yeah.
Maybe they spend 2 years here, 3 years here, and they go from place to place. We were never like that. Like for us, yes, we have a quota and we're trying to make commission, but at the same time, I will 100%, 10 out of 10 times, I will value a customer relationship and my reputation and my brand over what F5 is trying to sell. Like if there's something that is going to damage my relationship with that customer, it's not worth it for me because I'd have to look them in the face and say, you know what, that product that that you bought there, we sold it to you because there was some sort of bonus or something for selling that. Like it feels terrible to do something like that. And I know, I'm not saying that every vendor out there is slimy and is going to do stuff like that. There's lots of great folks that have great reputations, just like we did as well. But there are a couple out there that are going to, try to do things that only benefit them, and that's just not the best way to do business, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And especially coming from the consumer side, like I had a very different lens when it came to going to my team and saying like, "Hey, this is how you should approach the situation." And I would sit on sales calls, and it was funny, like you mentioned that my favorite phrase that I used a lot earlier is like, "Hey, look, I'm not in marketing." I was working for the marketing team, but my
Yeah.
easy one on the calls was always like, "Hey, I'm not in sales. Like if you buy this, if you buy $8 million worth of this, I get exactly the same paycheck next month. So
Yep.
I'm not vested in the success other than I want the company to do well, but like my goal is to make sure you're having a good, experience and you're actually getting value out of what we're doing." So it gives them a bit of a disarming thing where they say like, "Oh, okay. So if Eric's saying something, he most likely is genuine in his belief in it versus, yeah, I got a spiff that's, making sure that I can buy my kids an extra, motorized car this quarter
Yeah.
because I I got a bonus." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Nice to be out of that space at this point. I mean, we weren't always out there just trying to make our quota and sell the spiffs, but at the same time, you have this number that is very daunting every quarter to hit, and
Yeah.
so yeah, moving on to not having that number has been nice, and truly get to say, you know what, we're just here to interact with the community and tell you about things that you can do with your product and help you out.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly I have an incredible respect for folks that do have to, as they call it, carry a bag, right? That actually are quota carrying reps and sales engineers and systems engineers and whatever the title is, the responsibility is to carefully land the line between customer happiness and family and wealth happiness at the same time. So I've always said like I enjoy being on a call when it goes well and it turns into a deal, but boy, do I ever not want the responsibility to create that. It's a big difference versus just being there when it happens
Oh yeah.
versus actually creating that business. It's a huge responsibility.
Well, and one more thing to add to that is also shareholder um,
Right.
expectations as well. And so, I think about it this way: like every quarter, our numbers get reported. That revenue number, like that directly maps to the number that I would bring in for the company as well. So you almost, you're also serving the shareholders, which in a roundabout way, if you're investing in your 401k or your RSPs, and you probably have an index, you're probably investing in tech companies anyways. And so
Yeah.
there's this weird loop of like, hey, I have an interest um, in your company doing well as well, just kind of indirectly because my retirement is actually based on tech stocks.
Yeah, it is funny, especially that responsibility too, especially at the company layer, because you hit a great number, you have a great year or a great quarter. Well, guess what happens to that number next quarter, right? It goes up. And
Yeah.
it's never there's never a quota where you're like, you know what, you did 4 million last year. But why don't you do 3.5 this year? Why don't you just dial it back? No,
Take
it's
a
always
break.
like
Take a break.
always 4.5, 5 million, like whatever you do, like and there's the stretch goal. And like it's a it's a there's a mentality and a capability that's attached to that role, and that personality. It's like remember when there was like a real estate boom? I worked in an insurance. I worked in tech at an insurance company, and a bunch of my help desk reps all left. Literally, like 5 out of 15 help desk reps all quit because they took that like 3-week get your real estate license course. Well, this was
Okay.
in like '99. All you had to do was get someone to say, "Hey, I'll let you represent me." By the time you're signing the ink on the MLS, it was sold. Like
Yeah.
they didn't have to market, they didn't have to advertise, they didn't have to hold an open house. Houses sold themselves. So everybody got into real estate. And then in 2001, they were all going, "Hey, you guys still need any help desk people?"
Yeah.
Because they
Yep.
realized they weren't sales people. They were just standing beside the sale, really, in the end.
A little bit like that now.
Yeah, yeah, things are well, especially goodness gracious, BC, Vancouver. I remember I bought a condo in October of 2008, which everybody would tell you was the dumbest thing you could ever have done. But I was lucky in that I worked in a financial services firm and I had a pretty good insight into how I believed we were at the bottom. And I was both knowledgeable and lucky, and it worked out to be right. But real estate in the Vancouver area especially is punitively expensive. So I the prices were coming down, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna lock this one in, and I hope it stays. And it stayed flat for
Yep.
quite a while, but then it did go back up, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it's wild times here.
And well, because you're surrounded by water, mountains,
Yeah.
bears, and just pure unusable real estate. So there's nowhere to go but vertical or into the mountains, and it's really amazing to think. There's no wonder the prices are going up because there's no choice. Although now they've got this thing about the foreign real estate tax and like occupancy limitations. So I think that like traditionally there's a strong amount of outside investment that was coming into Vancouver, especially downtown, that all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we're going to start charging you annual taxes because you're not living here. Then those investments started to dry up.
Yeah. Although if you think about it, they were, it's a safe spot for them to put their money. And if the city is going to charge you 2%, but the asset is rising 25% year on year, then you can have your 2%. I'll take the other
That's right.
23.
Go ahead and take it. Yeah. Now, the other thing I said when we talk about hey, I'm not in marketing, right? And I remembered saying this we had done an event and I went to VMworld, and it was kind of like, this is my backyard, right? I'm surrounded by my nerd friends, and I was a blogger. So it's like people at one point, they asked me like, are you from San Francisco? Because a lot of people here. I'm like, no, we're like carnies. We go from town to town. It's just the VMworld is my friends. Just so happens they're all here. But at
Yep.
one point, I remember talking to my chief marketing officer, and she was amazing. Geeta was somebody who taught me so much. And I said something about how I get kind of trusted in these conversations because I get to say like, hey, I'm not in marketing. And she's like, hey, easy. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not a bad thing. But to the technologist who's going to talk with me, they want to know I'm a fellow technologist. And even in her reaction reminded me, I'm like, oh yeah, it is a weird thing when I work for marketing, but I'm not in marketing. And I learned very quickly kind of the respect of that knowledge that my team brought to what they do. And then I was really on that train, just helping in another area, but like that, recognizing the skill of that marketing team, what they do, I started to dig in, and community and stuff like this. So I'm curious, Boo, your experience as you made that transition, what was your path to kind of getting familiar with what they do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I still feel like I don't know what half of my broader marketing team does, and I'm slowly learning because I'll book 15 minutes. We can't meet in person, so I'll do a virtual coffee with them, and just kind of get an idea of what they do. But it has been interesting that in sales, we kind of expected, hey, a product comes out, there's all these materials and things that are all prepped for it. Oh, now I actually see how the sausage is made and
Yeah.
see, I know the person that actually made that document that you use, that made that reference architecture, that shaped how the product is actually positioned in the market because it can do a whole bunch of stuff, but we want it to, we think we have the best angle if we kind of take this route with the product. So it has been interesting to look at it from this perspective. And I really appreciate that so many of my broader teammates in marketing are really value my opinion on lots of stuff as well when it comes to what the stuff is doing out in the real world, if you will. And that has been fun to be able to contribute back to them, but also I kind of feel like I actually get to give back to my former teammates in the form of being their advocate and getting that message across. There's lots of other people that do that as well. I'm not taking away from anybody. There's lots of people in marketing who are able to kind of feed in from that side, but I'm
Right.
just an extra voice that's able to put in on that. But it has been, I've cleared up some misconceptions on the marketing side as to what they think about sales and on the sales side as well, cleared up some misconceptions of what they think about marketing. I would say there's far more people that move from marketing to sales, it seems like, than from sales to marketing. Um, and so, I'm hopefully filling in some of that gap there. But yeah, it's been quite a change to have these teammates.
Well, and I've talked to a few people and coached a couple people who've made your similar transition. And like I said, there's a financial impact. I mean, we don't want to say that's the reason we do what we do, but like you are moving to a point where if you have a great year, it will look the same as if you have a moderate year. But in a point where you have commission in addition to salary, you could get attached to a monstrous deal and you get a potentially life-changing level of income increase over time in those situations. And so to take that off the table, a really strong, somebody like you who could do and did do very well, obviously, like in the duration you sat in sales engineering, for you to step back and say, hey, like I'm cool with this, it shows how committed you are to that role. And it's not the
Yeah.
money that kept you on either side. It's like I dig this company, I dig the customer experience. I want to bring those two things together. I've got a big respect for being able to do that.
Yeah, you know what? I've gotten into these. I was on another podcast a few months back actually, and we got into this conversation. And I'd been an SE for 10 years, and we had many successful years. And I would give the advice to any SE: don't blow all your money. Invest your money wisely. If you happen to live in a place like Vancouver and invest in real estate, that's what I did. And later on, when the time comes, you don't have to do things necessarily for the money, and you can do things because you have a passion for it and want to pursue it. And hopefully, I've seen folks who get their first gig as an SE and they go lease a big BMW right away because they've got some sort of compensation plan for a vehicle or whatever it might be. And then, hey, you know what? That lease is it's going to feel a lot longer than it is when you're going through that. And if you have some pretty bad years, you're still stuck with that
Yeah.
stuck with that car. So, yeah, that's my if I can give any advice to an SE that might be listening to this is yeah, don't blow all your paychecks.
Yeah, don't let your lifestyle adjust to your current income because things can switch. Now,
Absolutely.
on the creator side, as I've learned too, when somebody starts to do something, it's generally they've dabbled, right? And the one thing I did discover once I saw your content you were doing on LinkedIn, and I really liked the style you were doing, and I've seen the adaptation. It's funny, even some of your more recent, have gone from a video to a vlog. You really have done the story setting. You're doing J cuts. You're doing stuff that's very specific to a true filmmaker storytelling style. And then when I did a quick look, a few months back, I was like, oh, I've got to find the rest of your YouTube videos. I found another Buu Lam channel featuring a
Yeah.
whole bunch of really cool stuff about cycling. And I was like, oh, like Boo's been at this for a while in this side of it. And now you're, coming up on the other side. So what brought you to initially, want to strap a camera on something and then tell a story?
You know what? The funny thing is that if you kind of look back at the dates, so that my personal YouTube channel was actually, I don't want to disappoint my followers over on the personal channel, but that was totally an experiment. And you can kind of tell if you look at the earliest videos on there. I was trying to figure out, what kind of stories can I tell on here, and I hit a mountain biking, or actually, if folks want to laugh, I made some videos about my air fryer. I was pretty excited about my air fryer actually. Um, the gym I go to, there's a bunch of folks who had picked up air fryers. It made meal prep super easy, so I was like, oh, I gotta get an air fryer too. Got an air fryer. I was trying to think of, hey, what kind of video can I make to try to experiment with creating something? And I was like, I just got this air fryer. I'll make a video about me air frying. And it hit really big on YouTube. And that's how I started to learn about the algorithm and nailing in on certain subjects and stuff, and kind of editing so that people don't get too bored on the videos as well. That subject wasn't really of interest to me, so it didn't really last very long. I did one other one, and that one did well as far as views went as well. And then I transitioned to mountain biking. I just got a mountain bike, and my both of my sons were getting into mountain biking as well. I was like, "Oh, I got this new bike, so let me make a video about a bike. It's about a product, so I can show that off." And then that video did really well, and so I did another video about my son's mountain bike. That video did really well. I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'll just do these mountain bike videos." And so I just started doing them, and then was able to incorporate story to them, um, looking at, places that we're going with them and things that we're discovering, because we're totally new to mountain biking. I have no place, uh, or no way I should be calling myself a mountain bike influencer by any means. However, it was just fun, seeing people interact with me on there and kind of trust what I was saying when I was actually just discovering things as I went along. But that's the origin of that channel and trying to learn it. And you'll actually notice, like, I got to a point where I hit my goal was, what would it take to actually make a YouTube channel that could make money? And everything that I read was like, oh, it's going to take 2 years to do this. You're going to have to make a video every week, or two
Yeah.
videos a week. And then you're going to get to that point. And I was like, okay, let's just figure this out. Is it going to happen like that? And then I kind of figured out, okay, if I make a video kind of like this, a lot of people will watch it, and that increases my subscriber base. So I just like did it over and over and over again. And you'll notice I kind of hit about 1,000 subscribers, and then it started to slow down because then I kind of hit my goal. And then at that point, I was like, okay, now I can take everything I learned and then just transition that to work, and then
That's right.
start doing that from a work perspective. But before that, I mean, I would just tinker around with cameras and stuff, anyways, not full blown cameras, but just like my phone, and then take a video of the kids, but try to make it a little bit more interesting, add some music to it. Nothing too crazy or anything like that. And the kids enjoyed that. They like watching that. My kids would make videos as well, so that would be cool. I could just hand over footage to them, and my oldest really loves making videos, and so he can work on that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it just kind of started from like home videos, documenting what the kids are doing, and then we have nice memories for family videos, and then kind of progressing from there to, hey, I'm making videos for my customers because we can't do a user group, so let's do that. And then kind of taking a bit of a detour and saying, okay, the YouTube thing could grow, so let's learn the YouTube stuff, algorithms, and how to make videos on there, and then kind of come back to work and say, okay, I've learned all this stuff now. Now I can apply it to work, and then
Right.
work on developing this for customers.
Now, and this is the interesting thing of like you generally have to take in a lot of knowledge. Like you're learning about the algorithm, you're watching other successful creators. Who did you kind of watch? Like what's in your subscription list as far as people that you watch regularly?
You know what? It's like all people from Toronto. It's like Peter McKinnon, Matty Hapoya, Chris Howe, Lizzie Pierce, um, guy that does all the camera reviews, Gerald Undone. Like those ones, I could fill with the stuff that they release. I could fill a week's worth of YouTube
Yeah,
watching
there's no
those guys.
shortage of content just by those creators alone, right?
Yeah, yeah. Then there's a few other ones. There's a guy named Potato Jet who I don't even watch his like camera videos anymore. He has like a vlog channel and he's just such a funny hyper guy. So I like just watching him. And then I like watching Casey Neistat. You mentioned Casey Neistat. I like watching him for like story composition and how he weaves things together in such a way that it just feels like he's just documenting what's happening. But you can
Right.
tell, like from the shots that he sets up, you had to have set up that shot and thought about it and rehearsed it, or maybe not rehearsed it, but it's ready to go to do that. So he's super clever, and I like watching that. And kind of now that I watch it from like from the lens of reverse engineering, it's interesting to see.
Yeah, it was I think I forget which one it was. It was one of the videos he did about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I was like, "There's a man who's just watched a little nice stat." Like, it was funny, you had, like, the nice sort of, like, you know, sort of, like, low beats intro and, like, and it's funny, like I said, stuff that I've had to learn, I had no idea what any of this stuff even means, I
Yeah.
bought a camera, and I'm an idiot, so I purposefully bought a camera that's really, like, manual. It's like I wanted to somehow make it hard on myself so that I would have to figure it out. And I'm also a little bit different. So I thought, let me go. My wife has Nikon gear.
Uh-huh.
And so she has this hardened rule. She says, are you a photographer or do you have Canons? And so she jokes all the time that she's like, no Canon allowed in our house. It's Nikon. We're a Nikon family. My
Wow.
father-in-law is a Nikon user. So I'm like, I wanted to get into videography though, not photography. And
Mm.
so like Nikon, all I read is about is overheating and maybe they don't do good 4K and a bunch of different stuff. So I thought it's basically Sony. And she says, like, why don't you look? There's this other Black Magic is another option. And so I
Yeah.
was like, Sony and Black Magic. I went out to a Twitter poll and I was like, hey, what should I do? And everybody was like, definitely go with the Sony. I was like, oh man, now I'm gonna have to be counterculture and get the manual camera. So I went with the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, so Pocket
Yeah.
Cinema 4K. Super fun, great, but no stabilization. So that's kind of a drag. No autofocus, also kind of a drag. But like for the shots that I'm doing, I like manual pull focus. I like that kind of thing. If I were to get a second camera, I probably may add a Sony to the group, if I were to get a second one, just because it would be fun to have a different style. But I really dig it. And then I got to thank you, Boo, because like I just put it out raw. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm like just messing with settings. I don't know what an ISO is. I don't know what any of this stuff is. So I just like dial in as what looks decent. And you poked a quick comment into one of the videos like, hey, looks like you're like, are you recording in raw or whatever? And yeah, totally, that's what I'm doing. There's no LUTs, there's no post editing, I'm just like recording, publishing. And you reached out, we chatted on Twitter, and said, I was like, and you offered, you're like, hey dude, send me some material. I'd love to take a try at color correction. And that like spurred me to go, he's right. I should learn this stuff. So I, took a little extra time and learned about color grading, and still obviously no idea what I'm doing, but thanks to
Great
you,
now.
it got better. And this is like, so I've learned how to add a LUT to the streaming camera, because that was the other problem. I would do
Mm.
post processing and it was fine. But the way the platform I use for the podcast, both of us are on here, so I can't apply a LUT to the video because it would screw up your video. So
Right.
I was still basically shooting raw half the screen. So anyways, that's I went way deep for camera nerds on this one, but I talk about your gear because I'd actually love to hear what kind of kit you're using.
Yeah, my kit is pretty. I'm staring at it right now. That's why I'm not looking at you. But my I think my kit is like done at this point. I wouldn't call it dialed in, but I think I'm done because I don't know what else I can add to it. Everybody asked me about the mic, which if you're into mics, you probably all recognize the Shure SM7B from podcasts from Joe Rogan, and this goes into an audio interface called a PreSonus IO24, which is like relatively new. It's a smaller one. PreSonus does really big high-end gear, and this is kind of like a nice one that can just sit on your desktop. And I use that for the audio delay. Actually, this goes into something called a cloud lifter. These mics are not powered, and
Right.
so it uses a cloud lifter to give it a bit of boost, and then that goes into it goes XLR from there into the cloud lifter XLR into the PreSonus, and then it gets its additional gain from there. But it also gets an audio delay from there. I have an A10 Mini, for my HDMI switcher. It has audio delay in it, but I was having some issues with my A10 Mini in that I think it was overheating and
Uh,
actually shutting down randomly, and so I couldn't trust it anymore. And so I actually I went down this path of trying to get off of there and ended up with this audio interface instead. I actually had a different one that didn't have an audio delay. And I should back up for anybody who's listening right now and wondering why this guy keeps talking about audio delay. It's because um, people will find out if you were to get into more of a higher end camera, audio signals reach your computer faster than a video signal will, and so you need to compensate for that with a bit of delay. A10 Mini has an audio delay function in it, so I could actually plug this mic kind of through an XLR output into a 3.5 mil jack on the back, and then take advantage of the audio delay. However, because of unreliability to the point where I had to RMA the thing, and had to pay shipping and stuff like that. I'm used to like IT products or enterprise IT products where it's
that's
like, oh,
right.
that's all part of your warranty, man. You will send you way bills, we'll send you boxes, and everything goes. A10 Mini is like, yeah, just send it to this address. Like, okay, are you gonna send me anything? Nope. you're you're
Yeah. Make
you're
sure you fill the
responsible for
customs
getting it
form
here.
right.
Yeah, fill out the custom forms. Make sure you put in your own padding into the box, and we'll get you a replacement. So, anyways, I still like my A10 Mini, but I didn't like the unreliability of it. My A10 Mini has a USB-C out for webcam input, but I actually use the HDMI out and go into a Camlink 4K, just because I find that the color depth is a little bit reduced. It's compressed over the
Oh,
webcam
interesting.
out, and so it's uncompressed if you go out the HDMI out into a Camlink. So I do that. So I have 4 inputs on there. I have this camera. I had a B cam set up before when I would actually do like overhead shots if I was whiteboarding for a customer. I don't really do that so much anymore, so I don't have that connected anymore. And then I have my laptop has a HDMI out that goes into another input on there. And then I have a Raspberry Pi, and it's not configured right now, but I had a Raspberry Pi that could actually play preloaded videos on there. And so some of the streams I was playing with this, like adding in stuff
Oh,
um,
neato.
through switching of the ATEM, and kind of I could do overlays, or I could just take over the video altogether. I don't do it so much anymore because it requires like setting everything up. Um, I should also say, I'll get into my camera for a second. I should also say, I didn't know any of this. I learned all of this from 2 people, Robin and Eric, who I work with at F5, who are gear nerds, far more than I am, and they got me started on this path, and then kind of got me started, and then they're like, "Okay, you're on your own now." And then I went and did all this other.
It's
They
like
didn't say
giving a
you're on
kid
your
his
own now,
first
but
cigarette and just saying, "Here you go. By the way, you're gonna feel weird tomorrow morning, but here's a place where you
yeah.
can buy more."
First one's free, and then they've unleashed this whole thing on me. So getting to my camera, I have a Sony A6400, and that's on a 16 millimeter Sigma prime lens. It's a 1.4 prime lens on there. I have two cameras actually. I have an A6600, Sony A6600 as well, with a few different lenses, and then I have a teleprompter with a 7-inch field monitor hooked up to it. And so right now, the reason why I look into the um, camera is because I have the screen
You
for our
actually
recording
have
right
the
now
output.
doubled over there.
Ah, nice.
So I'm actually looking at myself and you both on the same screen on here.
Oh man, you know what? You
Um,
just wrecked my weekend, dude. Because now I got to go set this kit up because I have the opposite. I have the problem where I've got literally the laptop is sitting underneath my camera because of like I used the field monitor and that was pretty good, and I've got a small prompter, but
yeah,
then the problem was it wouldn't get the output, so I needed the whole screen, and I was like, now I know you've given me my solution for this, which is awesome. Thank you.
yeah. You can grab a field monitor. I would not recommend the one that I have, so I'm not going to name it because I actually got I got burn-in from it. So it's on all day, and I've got like ghosting on the image, unfortunately. So I'm kind of disappointed. I don't know. I'll get another one eventually. It's okay for doing this, but I was kind of disappointed that it did that on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a big video light. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, to say I was going to check now. Now your lighting is really, really nicely done. So what's
Thanks.
your lighting setup?
Yeah, I have the video light is a Godox SL60. So it's not a super powerful light, but like it's almost on full blast right now. But it's good enough for this setting. I've got a huge 48-inch dome attached to it. So that would be it's like the sun basically hitting me. It spreads the light out, so that's why it's kind of big and soft. I've played with different sizes, but um, bigger is better. Bigger, closer, but softer is better.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I've got a couple LED panels back there. They have soft boxes on them as well, so it's not like harsh light hitting the walls. And then I actually turn off my lights in my office. I have overhead lights, but I actually turn that off because then it throws everything off, and I actually kind of just like this moodier
Yeah.
look, anyways.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's
yeah,
funny. I just realized I should double check because I'm going into overtime with you. Hopefully, you're okay to keep going
yeah,
because I did want to get
yep,
into this just to show you the example of my. So that's my backlighting that I've got is one of these GVM. It's like a 560 or 540 or whatever. It's like a the if you
yep,
go on to Amazon and you say buy me LED lighting, that's what you get. And I've got one over top of me, which is it is a pretty harsh light that is coming down, and that's what I was thinking about is like soft boxing something because for the backlight it's one thing because it's not in the frame, but this one it's like it really does shine a bit bright. It's not too bad. I can fix
yeah.
some
It's
stuff in
pretty good.
post, but I'm learning. And then the other one, of course,
Yeah,
is the fun part is like when you take out, it's amazing what a difference is once you actually take out the
uh-huh.
backlights. It's like surprising, just like little tiny things of putting the neon and how much it can change the way the background looks. I've always been surprised by, a little bit here, a little bit there. You experiment and you get your space set up, but once you dial it in and once you like know it's consistent, I practically can put like gaffer tape down and I know where my tripod's got to get set up. It's a standing desk, but I've got a drafting chair for it. So this
Okay.
way I can, stand if I want to, but it generally I'm sitting more than I'm standing these days.
Yeah, it's when you talk about the little details, it's funny how when you start working on this, like I didn't notice any of those details, and I'm like, why would people add these little bits and pieces here? I don't notice it whatsoever. And then you
Yeah.
start doing it, and then you're like, oh, you know what, a little light back there could actually help out, and a little splash of color. I don't have anything in the background there because I'm paralyzed by analysis by paralysis. Like I keep thinking about, oh, what do I want it to look like back there? And I have thought about it for months and still haven't decided on anything. I don't want to commit to anything. And so it's still kind of blank back there. But yeah, all these little things that you don't really think about until you start doing it.
I remember seeing somebody that did a breakdown, and I forget who it was, and like, so great folks to watch for this: Peter McKinnon, obviously, Matty Hapia, Teppo, his brother, his twin brother, which is hard. Make sure you have to look at the channel to figure out which one you're watching.
Yeah.
And although Matty sounds Canadian, Teppo sounds Finnish. You can definitely tell that Matty's been in Canada for a long time. And as you said, Lizzie Pierce, she's also really, really solid on tips. But I saw somebody and they talked about their background, and they're like, I like the natural light look, but I also don't like the inconsistency of natural light. So said, so that the window reflection that you see back there, and you see like like the frame of a window, he says, just a second, and he turns it off. And it's an LED light with a fake window frame in front of it to put it on the wall as if it was window light. And I was like, you magnificent bastard. It looked like you're in a beautifully lit room, but then it's exactly the same every time of all times of day, which is kind of stuff, again, you don't think about it until you're doing it and you're like, oh, natural light sucks.
and then it's like 1 a.m. and you're like, how did I get to the point in my life where I've spent 4 hours watching videos on lighting? But here we are.
Oh, amen to that. But it's good. And so, like I said, as far as what's possible, I always tell people, like, and you said it before, right? I look back at my first stuff and I was like, ooh, you almost think like maybe I should take it down, but you're like, nah, I look at YouTubers, filmmakers, you still have their old stuff up there, right? You see, Mr. Beast in his bedroom on an iPhone 4 saying PewDiePie 100,000 times. Like, he doesn't take that down because he's going to do 26 million views on his next video. It's like, it's part of what got you here. So I'm not aiming for 26 million views. I'd be happy if I got 2,600 consistent views in every, but it's part of the learning process. And I kind of respect people that leave it up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's paying respect to the process. I would say, people, you hate to, it's almost like lying to people, nobody ever, well, not a lot of people ever started amazing right away. Maybe some folks that went to school or something, and then the first thing that they published was a project that they worked really hard on. Maybe that was really good, but outside of that scenario, everybody went through this journey. So it'd be disingenuous to not show a journey to other folks as well. Like I'm sure everybody just respects that you put the time in, and if they want to do the same, then they could just follow the journey as well, and they can see all the little improvements you made every video.
Yeah, every once in a while somebody will ask me, they're like, how do you get that really cool, like slightly like out of focus virtual background? I said, easy, a $3,000 camera and a real background. That's how. I don't recommend this as the path to do it.
Yeah, but they're like, software could do it. And you're like, but it's a little different. So spend the $3,000.
Yeah, but I still, and I mean, how JV am I? Like, I still make the mistake. I'll have so many ones where I'm like, oh, you'll do a video and you're like this, and you're like, dang it. You're like, scrap that one, especially with manual focus. There's no leeway. And I've done them where I'm like, oh, so I've got focus assist on my field monitor, but I still have to literally there is an autofocus on the software. So if I tap a button, it'll find it, but it's not continuous autofocus. And sometimes because the background's pretty full, probably more than it should be, it sometimes grabs another thing, and all of a sudden it puts me in front of it instead of being the focal point. So I'll make mistakes like that, but I don't mind. It's and I thank people like you and a lot of other folks that jump in. They're like, hey, this is really cool, and like really good constructive thing, like advice on how to do stuff, and we all learn from each other.
I guess that kind of brings us back around to talking about community. Like, it's just People
Yeah.
are genuinely interested in helping out other people, and as long as you figure out ways to gather those people together, you get great things out of it.
Well, and in the end, Boo, what really does button this up perfectly is that many years later, here we are,
Yeah.
a completely different origin for both of us, and we will do this again, right? And because I believe in you, I trust you, and whatever your email address happens to be, I know that your integrity carries to wherever you go, right? And this learning process and this community, it transcends the vendor names, and that's because, and also just even inside a vendor, technology evolves, right? I was a VMware guy for a long time, and but I was before that I was the Microsoft PowerShell guy, and then I was the OpenStack guy, and then I was the
Oh,
cloud
wow.
guy, and now I'm the Kubernetes guy. I'm like, I'm the same guy.
Sorry
But
to
it
hear about the OpenStack stint that you did.
yeah, well, it was like an emo phase, we all did that. Uh, but it is proof that in this industry, we all find each other again, and the fun part is you see the genuineness in what people do and what they bring to it, and so I will have obviously links to your channel, and people should connect with you on LinkedIn and see the really, really great content you create. It's been an honor to be on this side of the camera. And like I said, now I got to go Amazon out. I got to get some my field monitor teleprompter cheat. This is fantastic. How did I not think of that before?
Well, I appreciate you having me on. For me, it's an honor to be on here, and I appreciate all the free content that you put out there that helps the community as well. Like, hopefully, these conversations, hopefully, mine provides some value to folks. But it wouldn't be possible without a platform like yours to share it on. So I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And for folks, if they do want to get connected with you, I guess I said LinkedIn. And what's the best way if folks wanted to track you down, Boo?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great one. I think I'm the one with the most amount of followers under the name Buu Lam, but if there is another Buu Lam out there that has more followers than me on LinkedIn, then I'm coming for them. Otherwise, you can reach me on Twitter, which is at Buu Lam, and then over on the DevCentral community, which is now called community.f5.com. It used to be devcentral.f5.com, but we've renamed it to community to kind of help reflect what it really is. So yeah, between those three, or if you Google me, I'm pretty sure I'm one of the top search results on there. So no matter what, you should be able to find me.
The funny thing is, I was about a year ago, I think, I was going through and I found a bunch of old business cards because I finally had moved all the rest of my gear from Toronto down to New Jersey, and I had this old school, and it's like my Microsoft contacts from when I was at Sun Life, like it was like all the stuff goes way back, and I had your business card in my
Oh,
list of
awesome.
business cards, so there's like a handful of people I was like, here's somebody that someday down the road, this dude's smart. I'm going to have to learn from him, and it is funny that we do end up reconnecting through different ways, but it's really cool to see that. And yeah, man, you're doing neat stuff. So there you go. Get
Thank you.
involved in the community. This is where the fun is.
Very cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Boo.
Thank you.